This is a Thanksgiving menu from the battleship USS Iowa during World War II. Now at first glance it seems pretty standard, but when cooked on a battleship, traditional dishes like these might not be exactly what you're used to. So I'm going to make a few of these dishes using recipes from the 1945 Cookbook of the United States Navy. So thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this video as we make Thanksgiving from World War II, this time on Tasting History. So I've come across numerous menus for World War II era Thanksgiving dinners both from the Navy and other parts of the military, and except for a few dishes here and there, they're all pretty similar. One description from a Thanksgiving dinner on the USS Iowa said the dinner served piping hot was a marvel in quality and quantity. Turkey noodle soup, saltines, roast tom turkey, oyster dressing, candied sweet potatoes, snowflake potatoes, giblet gravy, French peas, cranberry sauce, buttered asparagus, quartered lettuce, Thousand Island dressing, ripe olives, sweet mixed pickles, hot Parker House rolls, butter, coffee, pumpkin, ice cream, fruitcake, cigarettes. Cigarettes actually appear on pretty much every Thanksgiving Day menu from the time. Now, I don't smoke, so no cigarettes for me. Instead, I'm going to focus on 3 side dishes: the cranberry sauce, candied sweet potatoes, and oyster dressing. And these recipes tend to use some unorthodox ingredients and methods because they had to. They were feeding thousands of crew members at sea. Powdered eggs, powdered biscuits, powdered this and powdered that. You'd have scrambled eggs. You never saw an egg that you could look at and say, oh boy, there's a yolk. It was all powdered. We did have a good Thanksgiving dinner though. I don't know where they got the turkeys. They must have been frozen. And while I won't be using powdered eggs for anything, I will need things like dried sweet potatoes, canned oysters, and while the cranberries will be fresh, the sauce at the end tends to be more like something you'd get out of a can. Also, that man who was talking about the frozen turkeys during Thanksgiving said that in 1944, the USS Iowa crossed the international date line on Thanksgiving, and so they actually got 2 Thanksgiving dinners back to back. That is one thing about being in the military, you do get to travel a lot. Something made far more enjoyable when you actually speak the language of the place that you're going, with a little help from today's sponsor, Babbel. As one of the top language learning apps in the world, you can get started speaking a new language with Babbel in as little as 3 weeks. Now, you won't be fluent, but honestly, you don't need to be fluent to get some of the benefits of learning a new language. Like a few months ago when I was in Austria. Even having a basic knowledge of German made it so much easier to navigate my way through the streets and order the many pastries that I ate. Ich möchte alle die Torten bitte. I will take all of the cakes, please. And one thing I really like about Babbel is with their quick 15-minute lessons. Ich wohne in der Millerstraße 6. I can spend 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It just makes it a lot easier to tackle. And to really supercharge your language learning skills, Babbel now offers live lessons, and you get 2 free live lessons with your subscription plus a 20-day money-back guarantee. And right now you can get 60% off of your Babbel subscription with their Black Friday sale by clicking the link in the description or hitting that QR code on the screen. That's 60% off of your subscription when you use my link in the description. Now let's make some cranberry sauce, or rather molded strained cranberry sauce. Pick over cranberries, wash, drain, add water. Heat to boiling temperature. Cook until all the skins pop open. Strain through fine sieve, stir in sugar, heat to boiling point, cook 5 minutes, skim, pour into molds or pans, chill until firm. Now this recipe, as with all of the Naval Cookbook recipes, make a ton of food, about 100 portions. This one makes, I think, 10 pounds of cranberry sauce. So I'm gonna cut back on the ingredients, but I'm going to keep the proportions for all of the recipes exactly the same. So for this, what you'll need is 1 pound of cranberries, 1 pound of sugar, and 2 cups of water. Give the cranberries a wash and then drain them, then add them to a pot with the 2 cups of water and bring to a boil on the stove. Let them boil for a few minutes or until all of the cranberry skins have popped open. Then set a sieve over a second pot and pour the cranberries and water into the sieve. Start pressing as much juice out of the berries as you can. The liquid will go right through, as will some of the finer pulp, so make sure you scrape that into the pot as well. That's most of the flavor. Once you got all the cranberries strained, add the sugar, stir it in, and set that over a medium-high heat and bring it to a boil. Let it boil for 5 minutes and then pour it into a pan. Actually, the recipe says you should skim it and then pour it into a pan. I forgot to, so I poured it into a pan and then skimmed it, and it turns out it doesn't matter the order. Also, the recipe says that you can use a pan or a mold, and you could even put it like into a can so you get that canned cranberry shape. It's just going to take a lot longer to cool. Even this very thin layer in a pan took me 12 hours to chill in the refrigerator until it was nice and firm. As for the candied sweet potatoes, what makes this recipe rather different from your standard candied sweet potatoes is that it uses dehydrated sweet potatoes. The thing is, I'm not sure to what degree they were dehydrated, but I could only find one type of dehydrated sweet potato online, and they come in slices, and the recipe says that they should be in slices that you leave whole, so I kind of figured I was on the right track. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 2/3 pound or 755 grams of dehydrated sweet potatoes, 2½ cups or 500 grams of sugar, 1½ teaspoons of salt, and 1 stick or 113 grams of butter. So first, soak the sweet potatoes in water for about an hour and then put them in a pot with 2 quarts of water and bring to a simmer. Let them simmer for about 30 minutes until they're nice and tender, and then drain them, saving the liquid. Now, you're going to use this liquid to make the syrup. The thing is, I think there's too much liquid. The recipe says how much there should be at the beginning, but it doesn't say how much there should be by this point. So more could have steamed off, or the potatoes could have been even more dehydrated than the ones that I had, which would have soaked up more liquid. I honestly don't know, but I think it might be too much liquid, so I might just use half of the liquid to make this syrup if you're gonna make it. I used the full amount, and it just kind of made a bit of a watery syrup. Either way, mix the sugar and the salt into the water and set it over medium-high heat and bring to a boil. Then let it boil for 5 minutes while you butter a baking dish and line it with the sweet potatoes. And the recipe says to leave the slices whole, so don't be tempted to mash them up. Then once the syrup has boiled for 5 minutes, pour it over the potatoes. And here you can see that I have made way too much syrup for this amount of potatoes, which really leads me to believe that they were more dehydrated potatoes, but I couldn't find them, so I did what I did. Then put the butter on top and set it in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius for 30 minutes. So these sweet potatoes are done in a syrup, but I have to ask, do you like marshmallow on your sweet potato? Personally, I actually prefer like a streusel on top, but my Nana made them with the marshmallow on top, and so it just conjures these memories of wonderful family Thanksgivings when I was a kid. And for me, and I think most people, that's actually what Thanksgiving is all about. It's less about the food itself and more about the memories and the family of during that time of year. And that's why I think it was so important to the US government during World War II to make a commitment to supply Thanksgiving turkey, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie, American food for the American soldier in England, Iceland, India, Australia, in Malayan jungle and African deserts. Wherever he is fighting in this global war, the Army endeavors to feed him the food he likes, the food that makes him feel at home. I love reading the first-hand accounts of people's experiences during major world events like World War II, because even with the abject horror going on around them, people tend to grasp on to the happy moments that they do encounter. And for so many American soldiers during World War II, one of those moments was Thanksgiving dinner, even if the food that they were getting was not like the stuff they had back at home. You remember all of your early Thanksgivings with the family, and a certain feeling of nostalgia sets in. Then you take your mess kit, which is like an oval opened up, and go down to the mess hall and get your Thanksgiving dinner thrown into the mess kit. It ends up with the turkey and carrots all mixed. The cooks do a great job of trying to make it a festive meal, but when you mix it all together with the gravy in the mess kit, it's sort of like mush. I do remember that. Thanksgiving mush. Actually, every Thanksgiving, my dad takes all the leftovers and makes it into what he calls Thanksgiving pie, which is essentially Thanksgiving in a dish that's baked, and I actually maybe prefer it to the original meal. Of course, he is making that Thanksgiving Day mush, or Thanksgiving pie, in a level oven, a luxury not afforded to Navy cooks. I was on submarine duty in the Pacific in the year 1943. We were in the area off the coast of the Philippines. I remember having a complete turkey dinner on Thanksgiving. While the turkeys were cooking, the submarine took a dive. We went down too steeply, and the turkeys fell out of the oven onto the deck. The cook picked them up and put them back into the oven, and we ate them regardless of what may have gotten on them as a result of their fall. That meal was so good. And it wasn't just the Navy that got a big Thanksgiving Day meal, whether it had been on the floor or not. No, every branch of service got to replace their daily monotonous C and K rations with turkey and cranberry sauce on that day, though it was not an easy feat to accomplish. For instance, in 1942, U.S. Navy transport planes had to fly under threat of potential Japanese attacks above Guadalcanal in order to land at the recently captured Henderson Field so that they could deliver frozen turkeys to the Marines on the island. In addition to the turkey, every man got a cold bottle of Pepsi, and the cooks made some massive cakes. There's actually a picture of Lieutenant Colonel W.W. Stickney as he cuts one of the cakes using the sword of a Japanese officer. Though even with pilots willing to brave enemy fire to deliver Thanksgiving, sometimes to men in the Pacific it just was not in the cards. On Thanksgiving Day, we made our landing on Leyte Island in the Philippines very early in the morning. We therefore missed our dinner aboard ship. Somewhere down the beach from where we landed, the Navy sent us ham and cheese sandwiches. My buddy happened to get one of the sandwiches and brought it back to our area. I was complaining to him for not bringing one back for me when he started having stomach cramps. At this point, I shook his hand and thanked him for not bringing me a sandwich. And it wasn't just in the Pacific that getting turkey to the men was difficult, because as Allied troops pressed in on the German homeland in 1944, supply lines in Western Europe had become stretched thin. But as I mentioned, the US government had made this commitment to get a Thanksgiving dinner to everyone in service. And the general opinion was that irrespective of the morale value of a holiday meal, failure to meet a widely publicized commitment would have a very unfavorable effect. And so began the Great Turkey Lift of 1944. First thing that the War Department had to do was get a bunch of turkeys. Now, turkeys were one of the foods that hadn't been rationed, but that year there was a serious shortage of turkeys because the military gobbled them all up. So those on the home front had trouble finding their own Thanksgiving turkeys, and so that led to headlines like "Turkey Black Market Spread All Over City." As housewives fought frantically and often futilely for the precious bird, a rash of OPA violations was breaking out all over town. But despite the illicit turkey trade, the US military did get their hands on 3.2 million pounds of turkey and then proceeded to put all their eggs into one basket, or all their turkey into one ship. In October of 1944, the merchant vessel SS Great Republic left New York City with all of the turkey meant to feed the troops in Europe. On November 18th, it arrived in France and transferred all those turkeys to the cold chain, a fleet of refrigerated trucks which ran 24 hours a day back and forth to the front lines. They distributed the turkey along with several other dishes to the nearly 2 million men and women who were in the American forces in Western Europe at the time. Now, some didn't receive the meal until a few days after Thanksgiving, but overall it was seen as a triumph and really appreciated by those in the field. Thanksgiving dinner. There were always turkeys and pies and everything you would have at home. The food was often cold if you were in the field. Thanksgiving Day, 1944, the Ozark Division had just broken through the Siegfried Line at Aachen, but it was Thanksgiving. There was at least one incident where delivering the turkeys to the front line turned out not to be a blessing. It was in the Hütgen Forest, a dark and densely wooded area along the Belgian-German border. And on November 23, 1944, during some of the most intense fighting, First Lieutenant Paul Boch got a call from his captain letting him know that there was a delivery of turkey dinners coming to him for every man in his outfit. And in his memoir, Boch recounts this phone call. "Are you guys nuts? It's almost dark and my carrying parties have already made this trip up the hill with rations and water. I can't send them up there again. Besides, they can't feed a hot meal in the positions they're in now. Good God, they're right on top of the Jerry's." But the voice on the other end of the line said this order came from General Eisenhower himself and it needed to be followed. Besides, you don't want all of your men to miss out on this Thanksgiving dinner that every other man in the division is getting, right? To which Paul Boch said, "Of course I want to see them get a hot meal. I want to see them get 3 hot meals a day and a dry bed every night and a babe to sleep with. But let's save the turkey until they can pull back where they can enjoy it. Who the hell knows it's Thanksgiving except some silly bastard in the rear who gets hot meals anyway and just wants a change of diet?" But the order, ridiculous as it was, had to be followed. And so he gathered a group of men to go fetch the turkey dinner and bring it up the hill back to the other men, all under the cover of darkness, but all still within line of sight of the German army. And as soon as they started heading back up that hill, German artillery opened fire. And Vetch recalled the incident. 7 men had been wounded and 3 killed. An awful price to pay for a Thanksgiving dinner that nobody wanted to eat. A more uplifting Thanksgiving Day story took place a couple years earlier before the Normandy invasion, as the British played host to Americans. And they set up a bunch of Thanksgiving Day meals all over the country, knowing how important this holiday was to them. They even lent Westminster Abbey to the Americans for a Thanksgiving Day service. The Abbey was crowded to the doors, uniforms dominating both our own and British. It was a very impressive gathering. Upon the conclusion of this service, we had a few moments before going to the Dorchester for lunch. The American Society in London gave a big Thanksgiving dinner at which the guests numbered somewhere around 600. It was a real Thanksgiving dinner. Turkey, chestnuts, cranberry sauce, and all the rest of it, winding up with pumpkin pie and mince pie and ice cream. This was followed by a Thanksgiving reception at Buckingham Palace with the royal family, Winston Churchill, and the King and Crown Prince of Norway. This, of course, was only attended by the top brass, but still, it's pretty cool. Also, there is an old newsreel of the event at Westminster Abbey with some amazing commentary.
Thanksgiving Day is the great celebration across the Atlantic. It is the day when hard-hearted businessmen stop grinding the faces of the poor and think tenderly of their white-haired mothers. It is the day when old gentlemen of wealth chat chummily with beggars on a seat in Central Park. In fact, O. Henry and Thanksgiving are to America what Dickens and Christmas are to Britain.
And while I wouldn't put it exactly like that, it is a very important holiday for us Yanks. So important that it was paramount for the U.S. government to deliver Thanksgiving to the troops even during the midst of World War II. Though they wouldn't be able to have that Thanksgiving dinner if I don't finish this oyster dressing. So for this recipe, what you'll need is 1 pound of day-old white bread. A popular bread to use at the time was Wonder Bread, so that's what I'm going to use. 1/4 teaspoon dried thyme, 1 1/2 teaspoons dried sage, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, 1/4 cup of diced onion, 1 cup of chopped celery, 1/4 stick or 28 grams of butter, and 1/2 cup of canned oysters. Also, the original recipe calls for 20 pounds of bread, so can you just imagine how much stuffing that would make? Also, I think that this may be the least seasoned stuffing I've ever come across. Either way, cut the bread into little cubes and then mix it with the thyme, sage, salt, and pepper. Then take half of the butter and heat it in a pan and fry the onions and celery until they've turned translucent, about 8 to 10 minutes. Add those to the bread and then add all of that into a buttered baking dish and pour the remaining butter melted over the stuffing. Then put that in the oven and bake for 1 hour at 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 Celsius. Now when this finally comes out of the oven, it's going to be really, really dry. And that, I would think, is because it's going to be stuffed into a turkey or a chicken and then roasted, which will make it much more moist. The thing is, the recipe says it doesn't need to be stuffed. It can just be eaten as is, making it the driest dressing ever. Either way, just before serving, heat up the oysters with their juice until the edges start to curl, and then add them minus the juice to the stuffing. And here we are, a Thanksgiving meal from a World War II battleship. Now, I didn't roast an entire turkey the way that it was done on the battleship. It's pretty much the way that it's done today, but I did make a turkey breast just so I would have something to eat with this cranberry sauce. As you can see, it's very jiggly, even more so and more red, I think, than what you get in a can. Here we go. Okay, that's really good. So I really, really like that, but whoa, is it sweet. It uses a lot more sugar than your typical cranberry sauce today. It's almost like dessert, which I don't mind in a cranberry sauce, frankly, but I think it might be too sweet for some people. But it's a wonderful color. The texture is really nice, and you do get that cranberry flavor. Now onto the sweet potatoes. So they are very, very soft. They spent quite a bit of time cooking, so makes sense. Here we go. They're not as sweet as I thought they would be with all that syrup. They are firmer as well. than I would expect if we had used fresh sweet potatoes. I guess they just will never absorb enough liquid, but they're good. I'd go with regular sweet potatoes though. And finally, the oyster stuffing. Now I gotta say, this is the driest stuffing I done ever had. And it, you know, like I said, it did say that it could be made without actually stuffing the bird, but also I would probably chop up the oysters, and maybe they did and just kind of left it out of the recipe, but really big. But here we go. It's really dry, but the flavor is surprisingly good. See, I thought it was going to have way too little flavor. I would have usually put more spices, more onions, more everything, and I still probably would, but they do come through. So you are getting that, and you do get that kind of crunch from the bread. It's not super soft. It's just definitely a lot drier than I would like. Now, before I wrap up, I wanted to offer a Thanksgiving message, not from me, but from FDR, President of the United States in 1943. May we, on Thanksgiving Day and on every day, express our gratitude and zealously devote ourselves to our duties as individuals and as a nation. May each of us dedicate his utmost efforts to speeding the victory which will bring new opportunities for peace and brotherhood among men. Happy Thanksgiving, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.